The Great Molasses Flood. It sounds like the setup for a joke. A massive wave of sticky, sweet molasses crashing through city streets, flattening buildings and sweeping people off their feet. But this was no comedy. It was a real-life disaster. One of the most bizarre and tragic in American history. In 1919, Boston was struck not by fire or earthquake or war, but by molasses. Thick, brown, boiling hot molasses. And what happened that day would haunt the city for decades. This is the chilling, surreal story of the Great Molasses Flood, and once you hear it, you'll never look at syrup the same way again. It all began in the north end of Boston, Massachusetts on a mild January afternoon. The date? January 15, 1919. The war was over, the city was thriving, and life was returning to normal. But inside the Purity Distilling Company, something was about to go very, very wrong. Rising high above Commercial Street stood a 50-foot-tall steel tank, massive, looming, and filled with over 2.3 million gallons of molasses. The thick liquid was being stored for later use in producing industrial alcohol, mostly for munitions during World War I. But with the war now over, the tank had become a literal ticking time bomb. At 12:40 p.m., with no warning, the tank exploded. The sound was deafening, like a bomb going off. In seconds, a tsunami of molasses, as high as 25 feet in some places, surged through the streets at an estimated 35 miles per hour. That may not sound fast until you remember this wasn't water, this was molasses, thick, sticky, and heavy. A wall of it, weighing thousands of tons, moving like a freight train made of syrup. The destruction was immediate and horrifying. Buildings were ripped from their foundations. A firehouse was smashed and buried. Horses were sucked under like they were in quicksand. Railway tracks twisted like spaghetti. People were knocked off their feet, trapped and suffocated in a substance so sticky and dense that they simply couldn't escape. Witnesses described a surreal nightmare. One man said it was like being hit by a wave of hot glue. Others spoke of hearing people scream as they struggled and failed to breathe. Rescuers arriving at the scene could hardly move through the thick syrup. Some used axes to chop their way into buildings, only to find them filled with molasses instead of air. In all, 21 people were killed and over 150 were injured. Many drowned, others were crushed or suffocated. Some bodies weren't found for days. The molasses had hardened in the cold air, turning the disaster site into a giant, sticky tomb. But the tragedy didn't end there. In the days that followed, Boston turned into a giant candy-coated nightmare. The cleanup took months. Molasses stuck to everything: streets, sidewalks, buildings, skin. Even the harbor turned brown. Workers used salt water, sand, and even fire hoses to try to wash it away. Horses tracked it through the city. Please like and subscribe. Every surface was sticky. Everything smelled sweet. For years after, Bostonians swore that on hot summer days, the scent of molasses still hung in the air. As for why it happened, the tank was poorly built. Documents revealed it had leaked for years, even groaning under pressure. The owners had tried to paint it brown to cover the constant drips when temperatures rose rapidly in the days before the explosion, going from freezing to over 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Gases inside expanded, pushing the thin steel to its breaking point. The victims and their families sued the United States Industrial Alcohol Company. After a long court case, they won, one of the earliest major class action lawsuits in U.S. history. It changed regulations and set new standards for construction and corporate accountability, but none of it erased the bizarre horror of that day. The image of a brown wave crashing through a city, the eerie silence that followed the screams. The sticky aftermath that coated everything in sight. The Great Molasses Flood wasn't just a freak accident. It was a preventable disaster born of corporate negligence and a complete disregard for safety. And even now, over a century later, it remains one of the strangest and most haunting disasters the world has ever seen. So the next time you see a bottle of syrup, think back to 1919. To Boston, to the steel tank that gave way, and to the river of molasses that turned a quiet afternoon into a sticky, tragic nightmare. If you found this story as unbelievable as it is true, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more strange chapters from the past that history books often forget, but the world should never ignore.